my name's Paul Marsh, and today I want to talk about adding a custom connector to EasyRoads. So the problem I have is I've got this little terrain set up, and this piece of terrain here that I'm indicating with the mouse is actually a little railway embankment. As you can see on the railway embankment on the terrain, it splits into two. So you've got a track that goes up here and a track that could go this way off towards a railway station. Now, there isn't a connector out of the demo package for train tracks, so I'm going to try and show how to create a connector. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a little folder in here. I'm going to call this railway. So this will give me an opportunity to create my sort of core models. Let's just call that prefabs. And I've given the railway track, the current railway track model, over to a designer, and they've come back with this model. So you can see here, that's the existing railway, the parallel rails. And what they've done for me is they've added this sort of curved junction section to use as our points. So we'll be able to extend the railway track from here, from there, but now also from this one here. That's the idea. That's what we're striving to achieve. So I've got a little prefabs folder, so I'll drag in the FBX that they've given me. So let's just drag that into prefabs. So this is the same model that I've just displayed, and we'll just drag that onto the scene, and let's have a look at that. So there you go, you can see this sort of curved railway track thing. And because I want to edit this, I'm going to unpack it. So I'll unpack that prefab completely, and I'm going to rename this to Rail Track Junction. Okay, and then I'm going to drop that back into my prefabs. So it's just renaming it and exposing the items in it. So the next thing to do is, now I've got this piece of track there, I want to look at what a real piece of track looks like. So onto the road network, select train, add new component, shift click. Okay, so this is what a piece of train track looks like. Now you'll notice, if I just move this up a bit, that there's a rail. As you can see, that's the same rail as there. But we've also got some other pieces of information here, other detail. You can see that we've got some sleepers that are going across, and we've also got a ground. So how are they achieving that? So what I'll do is I'll come back into here and I'll say select object in hierarchy. So that will bring me to the game object, the Unity game object. And if I just open that, I can see that we've got something called train concrete, which is all the sleepers for the rail. And I notice that it kind of starts with one, and the train ground. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to take one of those concrete slabs and copy that, and then go back to my prefab, open prefab, and I'm going to create an empty object in here. Let's get this in the right place. Yep, call this sleepers. paste that in there. Now, it has the EasyRoads stuff on it. I don't want the EasyRoads stuff on this one. So this is the procedural stuff. This is the EasyRoads procedural aspect that allows you to generate the sleepers regardless of the length of track. Because this is a fixed junction point, I want a fixed number of concrete items, so all sleepers. So I don't need this component. In fact, I don't want this component. So I can get rid of that. And then we have the box 01, which is what they've used for the concrete sleeper, and the rail plate, which is the little bit of connector between the concrete and the rail. And if you notice that by default these mesh renderers are off, so put those on. So normally EasyRoads would turn those on as it's building it. And our position is wildly out. So let's just zero that off. So there we are. There's our base sleeper, concrete sleeper piece, and these are the metal plates. So obviously the offset is off here. So I'll just by hand, by eye, oops, what's happened there? Zero that off. For some reason I can't grab that. I think my machine's just been slow. Why has my machine been so weird? It's got some sort of snap-on. That's annoying. Why is my snap to grid on? Sure why that's on. Definitely on. Figure out how to turn it off later. Let's just do this by hand. So that's kind of roughly where the sleeper should be, I think. Let's just get down to track level. Yeah, that looks kind of about right. Now I'm kind of assuming that the first one, so let's put this at position 0 on the Z. Okay, so that's in the center. So 1, 2 is right at the edge. So we probably want to start about there. And then we can just duplicate that. So just duplicate it. And remember, you can use maths in here. So just 1, I know this math is easy, but 1 minus 1 is obviously 0. And then I can just come in here. I'm going to do Control D to duplicate it. And then obviously 0 minus 1. And again, this math isn't difficult, but just proving that you can use this function. So that gives us our sleepers on the main rail. And while we're talking about the main rail, let's just have a look at that. So this is a thing called left rail, which is what the original rail mechanism is called, and obviously that's a bit confusing. So what you need to do, and also notice that this is just an empty object, and in here there's a mesh filter and a mesh renderer. Now these need to be prominent for a connector. These are important to have these, so don't get rid of these, but we can move them around in the hierarchy a bit. So let's move those out of their containers. So we can delete these containers, we don't need those. And we can rename these. So let's call this straight. Actually, so this is the bend. Bend. And this one straight. That makes life a bit easier to understand. Okay. So I just want to make sure that this, yeah, that looks kind of okay. I'm wondering whether I should just make this rail actually rather than wire, make it a bit more consistent. I think I'll do that. Rail. train rail. I think we'll go with that. Same here. Train rail. Okay. Give them the same rail materials. Okay. So we've got our sleepers there, and I probably want a sleeper here as well. So I'll just create that. Again, this horrible snappy thing. I don't know what's happened there. And let's just position that. Rotate it by 45. This is going to be tricky. Get this sort of about there. It's always tricky when you're at an angle. I should change to local. I should know really. That'd be much easier. Yeah, I think it's about right. Okay, so we've got our basic kind of model in place, and now if you remember, there is a background as well, or a ground to this track. So let's come out of here. So that was our rail concrete. We've got rail ground. Now this is a bit different because of the way, the procedural way this is generated. There isn't anything to actually copy over, so it's just a mesh renderer. It's using rail ground, so that's the key point here. So if we go back to our prefab, and so that's the sleepers. So create a new empty object called ground, and in here I'm just going to put a cube. Okay, so ground, I need just to reset that. There's our cube, and we want to put in, is it rail ground? Rail ground. Okay, so now we've got a cube of rail ground, which isn't what we want. So I just come in here and shrink it down a bit. About there. Okay. And that is also too low. So hopefully, have I still got this annoying snapping? I've still got the annoying snapping. So just by eye for the moment. Reposition that. It's going to be okay. It looks kind of all right. Maybe a bit more. So about a bit about there. So okay, that's a bit more. Yeah, okay, about there. I think it's a bit squished. Let's say roughly there, I think. And we'll just move that to the end of the rail. And again, we can rename this ground. And because it's fixed again, we'll just duplicate this. And we'll move it up the Z order. Again, to the edge, about there. And then a slightly trickier one. It looks like it's too high, isn't it? So let's just move that down a bit. Again, we can play around with these figures. Let's just, I think maybe a touch more. Okay. Right, and one for the angle. This is going to be a slightly tricky one to position. So 45 degrees again. And we'll move that one over. Is that about right? Okay, move it back in the Z a little bit. This is tricky. I really should use a local coordinates. Okay, I think that is good enough for government work, and I'll just move that up a little bit so that takes the precedence, covers over the straight underneath, and yeah, okay, I think I'm reasonably happy with that. It's roughly right. Okay, so that's our prefab. So if we come out of the scene now, go back to the scene and just drag that prefab on, and you can see what's sort of going to happen, and you can see there's a lot of shade, a lot of shadow under that track. Is that a bit too high? Let's have a look at their one. Maybe it's too high. Yeah, it looks like there's a bit of gapping going on underneath. Yeah, there's too much gapping underneath. So let's have a look at the height. Oh, it's a bit difficult to judge. Okay, let's go back to the prefab and we'll just correct that height. Zoom underneath there. Oh yeah, you can see it's just, in fact the concrete's gliding underneath there as well, isn't it? So the ground, we need to just make that 11, 10, 10. Make that one 9. Oops, 0.09. Okay, and then we're going to move the rail down a bit as well, or concrete up to the rail. Oh, that's annoying, that's going to upset that one, isn't it? So that's 0.4. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay. That means the ground I need to move up again. Like that. Is that going to be 0 now? No. 0.05, 0.06, 0.07, 0.08. Okay, yeah, let's go with that. So again, that's going to be slightly less. So I want it slightly higher. Okay. Yeah, that looks a bit better. Okay. So now for the EasyRoads aspect of this. Now, I really recommend that you back up your project before you do this. If you make a mistake here or something goes wrong with EasyRoads, then it's very difficult to recover. So I would definitely zip up the whole of your project or copy it somewhere else. Just make sure you've got a backup. I've already done that beforehand. So what do we do? Enter into the road network, hit the config cog, and in here we should have connection objects. And then you hit this custom prefab editor window, and that brings up a new window, which I shall drag over to the screen. Okay. So what you do is this editor window is the thing that's going to allow you to explain to EasyRoads where your connection points are. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a brand new prefab, this prefab here. So it's going to take in our source prefab, the one we've been working on, and we'll see why that's not quite true in a minute. And then it's going to generate its own connection prefab with all the things that it needs in order to figure out how to do our connection points. Okay, so let's just get to it. So we drag our rail track junction into here, and then as you can see we get a little editor window showing our mesh. So in order to actually deal with the points on the mesh, we need to allow EasyRoads to create its version of it. So we need to say build connection object. I'm just checking my console window here. So build connection object. So that's created this new rail track junction. I haven't got any errors, so that's quite good. And I've got my first connection point here. So what you do is you hold shift and then you select the points and the vertices that you want to put a connection point on. And you can see that they all highlight green. And the important thing is the road type is train rail. And that looks to me like that's going to be correct. So that's good. So then what we do is we add, that's connection 0, we add a new connection point. And then we highlight again the things that we want to be a connection point. And just check that it's train rail. It is, that's good. And then we add another connection point. Now, I need to be able to highlight these. And as you can see, my designer's given me the curve, and it's got lots of vertices on it to create that curve shape. So what I need to do is rotate this around, zoom in a little bit, and I just need to, I guess 45 is going to be the point, and then shift and make the selection, missed, shift, make the selection. As you can see, it's not quite 45, so let's try 44. There we go. And that's train rail as well. So it looks like I've got the 3 connection points that I want. They're all train rail. So now I can apply that. Okay. Let's get rid of the editor. So now we go to our train network. We go to our connectors. And I'm going to say instantiate a new connection. And hopefully down here somewhere we should rail track junction. There we go. So click that and shift click to create a new connection point, and there's our connection point. But let's just check on here. Yeah, got the 3 connection points, but as you can see, it's just the rails again. So it's only taken the mesh across, and that's not really what we want. So we need to find that rail track junction. Rail track. Now one of these, let's go to rail track junction ER. So there we are. So it's just a prefab. So we open that prefab and you can see that there's the rail mesh. So because it is just a prefab, we can go back to our original prefab and we can say, well, okay then, let's take a copy of our stuff that we want, the sleepers and the ground, and go into their prefab and we'll paste them in. Okay, so now we go back to Railroad, go to our connection object, click on our rail track junction, shift click, and just because it's a slightly into the ground, let's just raise this up a little bit. Oh, there we go. Let's get this grid snapping off. But basically, there we have our prefab that we had before. And if we click on here, we should be able to, he says, if I can get the dragging going, bit of rail track. Get the drag, come on, bit of rail track, come on. I can't drag. There we go. Bit of rail track. So there is our junction. You can see here there's a bit of graphical glitchery going on here. I'm not a railway expert. Do you have double sleepers on junctions? How does this concrete sleeper work here? I don't know. I'm going to have to go and look and research how sleepers look. But basically, you can see that we've got our connections and it's all kind of working in a easy roads way. So that's my quick kind of introduction to doing these junctions. So just as a recap, what these junctions consist of is some kind of source prefab that's going to give you the road, and in this case it was our rails. You need some kind of vertices on that mesh, on that model, and you highlight those and you explain to it what the kind of road type is that you can extend off it. So in our case, it was always going to be rail tracks. If this was a rail crossing, then you would have said that this was some sort of road, but it wasn't. If you wanted to create some kind of weird junction off here, then it would just be the same process. Or if you want a left bend, then you would maybe flip the model and create a new one using the same technique. So yeah, as you can see here, also my ground mesh isn't wide enough. I didn't do enough work there to get that working. We can go back into the prefab and correct that all up, and maybe you want to make better ground meshes here for the junction dedicated mesh to make that look nicer. And you can certainly, all those sort of things are, I will leave up to you to make a better artwork job than I have done. But I hope you found that useful. Okay, thanks.